crawled toward us across the lawn, hanging onto Hasbro's leash with his teeth. Unlike Brendan, Hasbro was in a very happy frame of mind, and his head, which is large, was bobbing from side to side like one of those dashboard dogs with his head on a spring. I was afraid that he was going to start barking, which he often does when he's happy, so I shook my head at him and gave him a hard look. "Mrs. Ricketts intends only to do what's right for the children," Miss Peckworthy was saying now. "She would hate to bring social services into the matter, but there's the children's welfare to think about. I fully intend to take them back to Los Angeles when I return south at the end of the week. I'll leave my card with you." "That's as may be," Mrs. Hoover said boldly. "But I don't care a rap about your Mrs. Ricketts and what she wants. I've never heard of the woman." Ms. Peckworthy started up again. I don't know what all she said, because I was thinking about that last terrible thing. Take them to Los Angeles. If she had said that the world was going to explode at the end of the week, it wouldn't have been nearly so bad. Without my having a chance to stop him, Brendan stood up, put his thumbs in his ears, and waggled his fingers at her while sticking his tongue out and squinching up his eyes. He often does this to show contempt. Miss Peckworthy was apparently astonished to see him, popping up out of nowhere like this, looming through the fog and making faces. I stood up too, and Miss Peckworthy stepped backward and put up her hands as if we were going to leap over the bushes and attack her. Before I could say anything useful, Pete the cat appeared on the lawn behind her, having come all the way around the house. Hasbro made a dash at Pete straight through the bushes, and Miss Peckworthy stepped back onto his leash, which was coming along like a snake. Somehow she fell over backward and said, "Oh, oh, oh!" Mrs. Hoover went to help her, and so did Perry, except that Miss Peckworthy shouted, "Assassin!" and wouldn't let Perry near her, but acted as if he meant to harm her. She crawled to her feet, picked up the little notebook, shook it at us, and walked off very quickly without saying another word, looking back over her shoulder with her pickle face. She got into her tiny red car and drove away. So ended the first awful appearance of Henrietta Peckworthy. That wasn't the end of anything else, though, not by a long sea mile, as our old friend Captain Sodbury would say. Brendan wanted to get down to Lighthouse Beach in order to find his mermaid before the fog got any thicker, and so we forgot about Miss Peckworthy, said goodbye to Mrs. Hoover, and pursued our course along the bluffs, with me minding Hasbro now. The sea path runs right along the edge of the cliffs, with the ocean breaking on the rocks 200 feet below, and it can be dangerous in the fog, especially with the cliffs all crumbly after last winter's rain. Brendan hurried on ahead, but I shouted at him to slow down, because the fog was getting heavier all the time. And sure enough, very soon the fog closed behind him like a gray curtain, so thick that we couldn't tell right from left except for the sound of the ocean away below us and the grumble of trucks out on the coast road. After a moment, the fog swirled on the sea breeze, clearing just a little, and we spotted Brendan up ahead, standing still at the end of a dirt road that comes down from the highway. He wasn't alone. There was a car parked there, turned around and facing back out. A man stood beside it. The car door was open and the motor was running. Steam was coming up from the exhaust pipes, mingling with the fog, and you could see the taillights glowing red like the eyes of a deep-sea fish. There was no license plate on the car. It was then, at the worst time ever, that I realized I'd forgotten my evidence camera. I never forget my evidence camera, but now I had, and there was no going back for it. "Crikey," Perry said in a low voice. "I believe it's the legendary Lord Wayface the Creeper." He pointed with his walking stick, a piece of driftwood that he had found on the beach and dubbed the Melmoth Walker, which made no more sense than calling the stranger Lord Wayface the Creeper. That's Perry's brainy way of being funny. Some people find it obscure. The man was very pale, almost the color of the fog, and he was tall, with long, scraggly black hair and a hooked nose. He wore a worn-out velvet trench coat with gold buttons, like a gypsy or a pirate would wear, and a pair of heavy black boots and tight-fitting black gloves. He had the look of someone who was from someplace else, and a not very